the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
Chasing a butterfly, Chris.
Matthew, it's glorious warm sunshine. We're on the south slope and another one just came out from under our feet. One's over there as well.
We've been out here for about 5 minutes and now I think our eye is in.
Yes, and another one here. These are beautiful Wedgwood blue butterflies feeding on their food plant, which is bird's foot trefoil, just coming into flower. Bright yellow flowers. It's a legume. Here it is. You can just see like a pea-shaped flower down there, and this field will be yellow with them, their food plant, in about a week's time. Oxeye daisy just coming out. Yes, we're on one of the wildflower fields on clay, high pH, so lots of chalk in the soil, and a south-facing slope. And I should have put a hat on. I'm going to be kippered, surely.
It's very strong sunshine, lovely afternoon, and already this wildflower meadow looks the business, doesn't it?
Yes, it's all the species that we're looking at are deep-rooted, and at the moment, because they're on clay, normally it's waterlogged soil here, they're unaffected by the lack of rainfall. Hopefully in the next few days we will have some rain, because we've done an emergency hay cut, and we've cut it, well, more than a month earlier than normal, and it's really, really poor. I think we'll be lucky to get 1 bale per acre.
It's all a bit dusty, is it?
Yes, it's just, it's died on its feet. So the idea is if we cut it now, we may get a second cut. But any hay at this time of the year is very valuable. There's an old motto to do with swarms of bees. A swarm of bees in May is worth a load of hay. A swarm of bees in June is worth a silver spoon, and a swarm of bees in July isn't worth a fly. It goes something like that anyway.
You do very well there. I keep spotting these blue butterflies
yes,
now.
They're very diminutive. There's one, yes, but they're on the move. They are very, very active because of the heat, and they all have short lives. We'll just walk down here. I've just seen one settle in. We're talking about a butterfly with just over ½ an inch, so 2 centimetres wingspan at the most, and stunningly beautiful. One just flew around me. And
They are quick movers.
yes, so just really difficult to get them to stay still, so you can just glimpse that glorious colour.
You just get an impression as they go past.
Yes, you
But there
do.
are quite a few, there's another over
Yes, and every time we move, there's another one just hovering over. We'll just watch him. See, it's a male, and we'll see if he goes down. The females are darker brown colour underneath and don't really look like the blue butterfly. Another one just came up under your feet.
Rat is enjoying this game,
He
isn't he?
certainly is. The hotter the better for Rat. He just loves the sunshine and basks out in it, rather like these butterflies. But they need these kind of wildflower fields, and that's why many of the butterfly species have gone in decline, because areas like this, full open sunshine, a large area, this is 40 hectares in total, so best part of 100 acres, that just doesn't really exist so much, particularly as the soil type is exactly right for the legumes, in particular bird's foot trefoil, as I've mentioned already. That's the food plant of these butterflies. And just along the top margin there, that's called Hallback Lane. There's hazel along there. We're quite close to Arminghall Church, to give you an idea where we are. There's some green hair streak butterflies, which also uses... Oh, Matthew, just there, look. Just flirting with... Oh, look, come on.
It's landed.
It's landed. We should get a closer... It's got its wings open. There you
Yes.
are. White or silvery margin round the edge. Just look at that.
So
and
beautiful.
Rat's gone nose to nose with it.
Just sent him off.
Oh, would you believe? But you can get an idea of that fabulous colour, which is what everybody gets excited about, the blue butterflies. They're always sort of symbolise summer, don't they? And glorious hay fields and meadow fields like this one. So that's a lovely way to start this week's Countryside podcast. But there's other yellow flowers I'm looking at here, and there's quite a patch in front of us. And just look at this. There's meadow buttercups, creeping buttercup as well, ranunculus repens, ranunculus acris is the meadow buttercup. And these yellow flowers just forming pods is yellow rattle. So that's why the wildflowers are doing really well. When you look down here, you'll actually see, I called it a hay meadow, but there's actually very little grass here because it's been parasitized by the yellow rattle. And it's really in profusion where we're standing.
And that's your kitchen table industry, isn't it? Harvesting
Absolutely.
the rattle.
Yes, I harvest it with a loader with a very sharp cutting edge, and the seeds flop into the bucket, and then I spend hours and hours in the shade sieving it on hot summer days, and it goes out all over the country because it's very hard seed to actually separate and get 100% pure. But nevertheless, the whole point of this is to help declining insect species. And don't forget, at night time there's as many species of moths here that you can possibly count, as well as all the butterfly species during the daytime. And the blues are joined by several others. Oh, there's two blues together, one flying right over the top and the other one flitting round. Another male just going round. Yes, we look like a couple of Victorian butterfly collectors trying to keep pace with them.
And you said they'd only got a short life.
Yes, they have. Just sometimes a week or even less. Another beauty just flying past us, always on the move, looking for food plants. So there's a lot of sort of worry about them at the moment because these dry conditions mean the plants are coming into flower, but they're not producing the normal amount of nectar, which has a lot of water in it. So what they're doing, they're producing lots of pollen, and the butterflies can feed on that. But generally, most of the butterfly species we're looking at really feed on just the nectar, which has the water in it. And if the plants are suffering from lack of water, they don't produce the same volume of nectar that you'd normally have in what I call a normal year. But many of the species are short-lived, and we've got some questions later on to answer. And some of the insect species live for just one day only as an adult and 2 or 3 years in the water, and we'll be investigating that. We'll finish off the podcast near the lake at the farm here. But nevertheless, I don't know which way to look, to be honest, to try and get us up close. But that's about as close as you can get to a common blue. Really demurely beautiful little butterflies. We have another one here, which I was hoping to see this afternoon. That's called silver-studded blue, which is even more beautiful. And it also shares that same food plant of birdfoot trefoil. Seems very, very popular, just because I suppose we've got so much of it here. And later on, as we get into summer proper, if we get some warm southerly winds, we can have something like clouded yellow butterflies come up here. You get occasional years where you have a large amount of them arriving, and quite scarce. And that was a female, just went past us, and she was quite brown and didn't look like the blue species of butterfly that we're actually looking at. So some have just landed in this patch in front of us. We'll have one more go and see if we can get you up close. There's a lot here, though. There's several thousand on the area that we're looking at, but they're on the move so much they're kind of making hay while the sun shines. That was a small copper.
Evening all.
Evening all. Just flitted off. Yes, so we're now in a large patch of bird's foot trefoil, and it's looking dark green. Because it's a legume and it's fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere, which is fantastic plant. So there we are. They've given us a slip again. We could sit here all afternoon, and I'm sure we would get close up, but we need to be getting on and doing some other topics.
Well, it's an idyllic early afternoon, summer's picture here in the heart of Norfolk, High Ash Farm, our weekly podcast, and you're very welcome. Despite the lack of rain, everything is looking really lovely here at the farm, and we will carry on, Chris. So lead on.
Yes, yeah, we've got some. Look at that, 2 of them.
3.
Cavorting. 3. Wow. And one's almost landed on your trouser legs. One, oh, they like your blue shirt. That's what did the business. I'll remember that in future.
It's a similar sort of colour, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, right round us, just 3 common blue butterflies. That was a stunning moment.
You're going to put your hat on? We've come to the other side of the farm. We don't often come here, actually, Chris. It's a beautiful outlook with the hedges and everything grown out and the lovely trees here as well. And you're wearing your hat.
And I have put my hat on.
Very sensible.
Yes, it's beating down, and if you're out in the sun all day like me, I do wear quite a high factor sun cream because you just have to. And as you get a bit older, your skin's less tolerant, I think, as well. So I've avoided all the usual problems so far, but it is unusual. This is really heavy clay soil. We've moved from clay up on the north part of the farm and come through some gravel, some sands, and we've raised up on top of another hill now where we are, and I think all the sandy portion has washed away and it's exposed this lovely soil here. It's fantastic wheatland, and this is about to be sown in the next few days, we hope, if rain arrives here in Norfolk. And we'll be putting overwinter wild bird seed mix here with mustard, fodder radish, wheat, spring barley, triticale, linseed, camelina, which is also called gold of pleasure. It's a lovely name for it. And the whole centre of the field, and there's 3 hectares, which is about 7.5 odd acres here in front of us. We're now going to walk up to it because it's a very special area on the farm which is specially planted for rare arable weeds, and that sounds really head-scratchingly odd thing to do. It's clay with flints in, so we're looking down at the ground on the
very sharp
cultivated
flint,
bit, and they're very sharp. And modern agricultural machinery goes through quite quickly and it can break the flints, but before the invention of the modern agricultural machines, a lot was done with horses, and I was kind of born at the end of the horse era, if you like. The first tractors were working here at High Ash Farm, and when I chopped the sugar beet out on these fields, it's really good fertile soil. I got very bored with it, and I started finding flint axes because there's a lot of flint in the clay, and it's obviously mined and dug nearby, and they're absolutely beautiful. I keep them in my house, and it's a very proud part of my collection, particularly the tiny little flint arrows which you can almost see through there. It's just puts you in touch with the past and how our ancestors, and those Neolithic people, 5000 BC, are all part of our ancestry, whether we know it or not, and they kind of lived, I think, in harmony with their environment, and we've done so much so to lose our habitats, some of our wildlife as well, and it's my job, if you like, to help restore it and put it back again. What can you say? Oh wow, well spotted, Matthew. A hare's just running away from us out of the fallow plot here, which is just blowing in the wind. There's various species of grasses out here, but I hope I'm in the right spot. I'm just going to walk over here.
Rat, by the way, hasn't heard the song Mad Dogs and Englishmen because he's now in the shade under the pickup there.
He is, yes. Yes. Oh, right. Fingers crossed we're in the right area, and I've marked this particular area with a cane. Yes, I can see what I've come to see. Wow.
Right. I'm intrigued.
Matthew, we've got a new pope at the moment. Don't look at me like that. Leo the 14th. And he has described himself as a shepherd of his flock. So all his followers, all the people that worship him, he's regarding them as sheep, if you like, and his job is to keep them safe, to give them help and advice. And he seems a very pleasant man, very knowledgeable, very understated. And that set me thinking, if he's a shepherd, so immediately in my strange head, I wondered what plants we have at the farm that are related to sheep and shepherds. Right, well, the first thing that springs to mind is I have a shepherd here at the farm, and he keeps his sheep here during the winter months, and would you believe his surname is Pope? Will Pope. You couldn't make it up. So we're now going to visit this fallow plot for sort of scarce arable weeds, and both the ones we're now going to look at, and there's several with sheep or shepherds in the name, but these two I've chosen are both special. They both have little tiny white flowers, and more importantly, the flowers are in the form of a cross. They're crucifers, hence Christ on the cross. So the first one is just down here, so it's hands and knees job for me. This one is quite common. It's got diminutive little white flowers. You can see it. It's about 18 inches tall, and tiny little white flowers on the top. There's a little bunch, must be about 12 of them, about the size of a cigar end, if you like. That's the whole 12 flowers, and they're diminutive, tiny little white flowers, and each flower has 4 petals on, hence crucifer. Now, gets interesting a little bit further down the stem. Once it's finished flowering and the little seeds, the flowers get pollinated, it immediately starts to produce these, which are shepherd's purse. That's where it gets its name from.
This is the shepherd's purse, and
Yeah.
these tiny little leaves.
Well, they're the seed pods.
The seed pods are in the shape of a purse.
Yes, the old-fashioned purses that shepherds and medieval people used to wear on their belts. It's in the shape of a triangle, and you'd have a tiny piece of leather to keep the top of the purse shut tight. So hence shepherd's purse, and you'd carry it on your belt, rather like you'd perhaps carry a bunch of keys today, but it's definitely related to sheep and keeping sheep, so shepherd's purse, and it's a crucifer. So that's that one. So it's a close link to the religious part of it. Now, we don't need to move whatsoever, because here is a diminutive little plant, tiny white flowers. I don't know how you can describe the size of that flower, Matthew. It's got 4 petals. How big is it?
I don't know. You'd say that is like almost a granule of coffee, isn't it?
Yes,
size, tiny.
That's about it. Yes, a little bit bigger than a grain of granulated sugar, I suppose. Pure white.
Perfect little white flowers.
Yes, they are. Again, each flower is in the shape of a cross, so it's a crucifer. And the leaves, the best way to describe them, hugely finely divided, and it looks like parsley. And interesting, although the flowers are diminutive and tiny, once they're pollinated, it throws up these flowers, these seed pods, I should say, in the form of a long tube with the seed right at the bottom.
And these are like fingers pointing north,
yes,
up.
Yes, and they're quite long, close to 50 millimetres, getting close to 2 inches. And the plant itself's only 6 inches tall, and it's called shepherd's needle.
So we've had shepherd's purse.
Shepherd's needle.
And these are like needles, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. The seed pods are exactly like needles. And, of course, I've got to... Picture says 1,000 words, so later this afternoon I'll be calling Laura Cuffin, my photographer, with her macro lens, and she'll need it for the size of the tiny flowers there and the seed pods, and we'll see if we can capture these 2 flowers next to each other, so you'll be able to enjoy them on High Ash Farm Facebook for this Sunday's podcast. Now, shepherd's needle, because of modern agriculture, it's lost a lot of its habitat. It's not particularly susceptible to modern herbicides, it doesn't. Whereas shepherd's purse is very susceptible, and a lot of the old problem weeds, if you like to call them, the wildflowers, things like corn chamomile, lots of the other species, corn cockle for instance, and cornflower even, they're all pretty well extinct in modern arable fields. So that's why this fallow plot is here, and it's my delight and joy to have things like this, because this is a really rare arable weed, shepherd's needle. Shepherd's purse probably grows in your garden. You probably pull it out when you're doing your weeding, not thinking twice about it. But this one's a rare fellow, and it's just extraordinary to have it come back here. It's brought itself here, or those strange seed pods with the seed in the base of the long needle-like structure, which is the seed pod, is still here in existence. Now, why is it called shepherd's needle? We find out easily why shepherd's purse was called, because of the shape of the purse, but the needle bit, it's very sharp, it's long, and it's got a blunt end, and it was used by shepherds to sew the skin of a dead lamb on top of a living lamb. When you wanted another ewe to adopt it, say the ewe had given stillbirth to perhaps 2 twins, and yet it's got the milk, so you would, it sounds a bit macabre, but you'd skin the 2 dead lambs and pop them on and sew them on with a very blunt-ended needle like this, just to hold it in place, so the ewe would think that's her babies and she will then take them on. If they didn't smell of hers, they'd be rejected out of hand.
I believe it's a technique used to this day.
It can be, yes. Yeah, it's less often it happens, because often, unless you've got a very large flock, you actually foster them by hand in a special barn when they give birth, but many of them are born outside, and it's a trick shepherds use. And there's one Northumbrian farmer who was doing this, and he just discarded the carcasses down the end of the farmyard. It sounds a bit gruesome. And of course the local kites, red kites, found out that this farmer was kind of what they thought he was feeding them, and he just did it to discard them. And a lot of farmers sort of shook their heads at him and said, what you're doing with all this, the public, there's queues of cars down our road, we can't get to our farm because they're all coming to yours to watch the red kites. And he ended up buying carcasses which are partly dressed out and feeding the kites. He's got a flock, if you like to call it that, of over 200 kites on his farm.
Wow.
And that's taken over from the income from the traditional sheep farming. So I thought Norfolk had the motto of do different, but I take my hat off to him. But nevertheless, shepherd's needle, so 2 really important arable plants there, both linked to the sheep, and both linked to our new Pope, Leo XIV, who's the shepherd of his flock, and I'm shepherding these plants, if you like. They're under my control and jurisdiction, and they're thriving, is the only way to put it.
And important for biodiversity, the
Yes.
plants like this still exist?
Yes, absolutely, because we don't fully understand all the links between the plants, particularly the rare ones, and why some of them have become extinct and what that actually means for us. And so by keeping biodiversity alive and well, the maximum amount of species that a particular habitat can support is really, really important. We're just beginning to learn all about it. Modern society's pushing on. We're putting concrete and houses and solar farms and things like that, which we have to for modern society, but there still has to be a space for these wild creatures, animals, insects, and in particular these plants, because we don't fully understand what they actually mean to us and to the world. They have their own right to be here, of course, that's the other issue, as do all the animals on the farm here. Right, the next stop is a little bit cooler. We're right out in the middle of a field, everybody. The sun's blazing down.
Look at Rat luxuriating in the shade under your van there.
He is. There's only one place to go on a hot day like this, and that's down to the farm lake. Come on, hop in the truck, we'll go and cool off.
Once again, a glorious scene down by the lake here at High Ash Farm. Very bucolic, really, isn't it? It's a superb scene here with the wildlife and 2 ducks as well.
Yes, mallard on the far side, a duck and a drake, and there are 2 ducks in the reeds around the far side, and the brambles over on the far side there. They're still incubating, and I'm expecting lots of ducklings on this area of water in the next day or so. And some have hatched out at the farm, on the farm duck pond already. I think it was a clutch of about 11 ducklings, and there's 5 remaining, about half grown. And they're superb. They're actually feeding themselves because the water's quite warm, the weather's warm as well. Anyway, I thought we'd come down here and finish this week's podcast because, you see in my hand, I bought something I haven't used for years, my old fishing landing net.
I thought that was to scoop rat out of the water if he fell in.
He's very anti-water. He will just go in and have a drink, but any sort of self-respecting Labrador would be in there swimming, doing lengths straight away. But he's very cautious of the water. I don't know quite why, but yeah, so irises on the far side of the lake, flag iris,
Lovely
all
yellow.
the way round, in full flower at the moment, and they've established themselves. Everything's happened by nature. Nothing's been introduced. Just the pond has been dug, and one growing here right beside
Very
us.
attractive yellow flowers.
Yes, yeah, absolutely stunningly beautiful, and also lots of little white flowers, and they're floating on the water. You can see them right out in the middle where the water's quite deep, and they float about, and when the wind blows they'll end up at one end of the lake, and then when the wind blows another direction they'll end up the other end. And they have 2 sorts of leaves, some of them that float on the top. I can just use the other end of my landing stick. You can see there's some leaves there, just there, but the leaves underneath the water are very feathery. There they are. It's a poisonous plant, and it's called water soldier, and it's now nationally quite scarce. The best place to see it is on the Norfolk Broads here in the eastern counties, and apart from that and a few other areas in the UK, it's relatively scarce, so I'm very privileged to have it here. I'll see if Laura Cuffin can capture the diminutive little white flowers that look rather like strawberry flowers. So what we did, actually I hardly need the net I brought, because I think about a month or so ago we came here and we investigated the frog spawn. Bees having a drink around the edge, honeybees just dropping down. And the margin, I was going to use this net and go underneath the water soldier like that, poke it into the water, and then pull it back, and then pull it in and see what we caught. And the answer's nothing whatsoever, apart from a little bit of water soldier weed. Because it didn't need to. Just look at the edge here.
Wow, look at that. It's alive with squirmy tadpoles.
Exactly. And we've talked about the butterflies in the past having metamorphosis. Egg is laid, the egg then hatches into the caterpillar, so you have a complete change of body, if you like. The caterpillar then pupates when it's finished eating from its food plant, and becomes a chrysalis. The next stage, that's again something completely different. And then the 4th stage is the emergence of a butterfly or a moth. So you have those 4 stages, and with the tadpoles it's very similar. We came to visit when there was frog spawn here, and I think the tadpoles had just started to hatch. So this time, instead of going right out in the deep water, we're going to go into about 2 inches of water, just skim the net along the top.
Oh, you've got some.
Oh yes, look at this. Now this is what I wanted to see. The tadpoles, there's a mixture, and they're quite difficult to tell apart at this stage, of frog tadpoles and toad tadpoles. Now something starts to happen. They're all about a total of 10 weeks old, I suppose, something like that. Now they've reached their maximum size as a tadpole, and so what happens, the tail starts to shorten. It's called reabsorption, and if we're really lucky, just at the back end of each of these tadpoles, you can see two little, almost tiny little structures just coming out of the back, and they're the first of the legs to appear.
Oh, yes, I can see on that
the
one
hind
there.
legs. Again, here's a perfect one there. It's a little black stub just on the side of that. Yes, just on the side.
I can see the toes, actually.
Yes, yep. And that's the beginning of the next stage of metamorphosis, from the tadpole going through. It started off as frog spawn, then to this stage, the swimming tadpole, and then the next stage will be almost the beginning of a young frog. They will start to look like young frogs in about 2 to 3 weeks' time. It all happens again, as I've said many times when we're looking at nature, it all happens very quickly. Perfect one there. It's curled its tail right round, and it's just showing that hind leg, which is going to become the hind legs of either a frog or a toad. Toads tend to crawl across the ground, and frogs, as we all know, jump. But that little bit of net into the shallow water, just 2 inches deep, and I must have got a dozen of these very large, fat, very well fed tadpoles.
And there are many more enjoying this very shallow water in the sunshine.
Yes, they are. So they're basking and in the warm water on the edge of the pool, which is their favourite habitat. Right, we'll turn those back upside down. Pop those back, wash the net, make sure they're all free, which they are. Oh, there's one left. Off you go.
I should imagine that net has seen some action over the years.
Oh, yes. Yes. Landing, when I used to fish for in rivers, I spent my childhood at on beside the River Tass here at the farm, catching all sorts of things, and the best way would be to lower the net into the water and haul back. They were all tiny. There was no sort of catching whale-sized fish or anything like that, but nevertheless it's a lovely sort of way of seeing all the different habitats that you can have on an individual farm, and all the individual and varied species that you can attract. And we've had otters on here, we've had kingfishers, and oh, my first damselfly of the year just flew past, iridescent blue. That's the first one I've seen, so I was spoilt just then. It just flicked past. And it's coming up to that season, and I'm really surprised, because it's so warm today, that we haven't had swallows coming to drink on here, because it's warm weather. There's very few open areas of water in this area of the farm.
The swallows know this area, don't they?
They do,
and
yes.
They will come down and swoop down
Yep.
and take little
Yep,
beakfuls
they
of water.
just drop their beak, rather like a plane sort of skimming across the top of the water to scoop up the water for firefighting. So the swallows get it exactly right. They fly into the wind, just drop down, drop their head, scoop up the water, and then fly off. And usually 1 or 2 beakfuls does it, and it's just a glorious sight to see that happen. And even on really hot days in July, the swifts will do the same, and joined with the house martins too. So it's a glorious sight. It's like a magnet for wildlife, and at night time all sorts of things come here and have a drink. It's like a watering hole in Africa, except it's at Caister St Edmund.
Well, it is a beautiful sight in this sunshine as well, and really the wildlife that this fosters is unbelievable, and for somewhere that was just a part of a field 25 years ago.
Yes, it certainly was. This was excavated in 2006, and this is what can happen with a little bit of imagination and the right sort of habitat, with a stream running beside it. It's on a south facing slope, and the stream's running downhill, so it comes into the pond one end, or the lake one end.
There are many bird species on High Ash Farm, and Chris Skinner, that's one of them, isn't it?
Yes, very diminutive. Matthew, we're being serenaded by a wren.
Just one of the great delights of visiting the farm, but we need your assistance.
Yes, to keep us in fine voice, we need a few donations.
Any surplus funds to go towards the wonderful conservation work, to make a small one-off payment or a monthly donation. highashfarm.com/ podcast.
Believe me, it's just a pure delight.
And that includes Jenny Wren.
Very fine voice. And we got a big overflow on the other side there, and the water drops 5 feet down, and that's the beauty of having a hilly farm. You can do magic with water just like that.
We've got some emails.
We certainly have. Well, let's head back to the truck.
Usual crop of photographs and messages and questions coming in on the emails, and thanks for all of them. Kerry says, "Hi Chris, please can you identify the attached photo for me? I saw this creature on the water, assumed it was laying eggs as its wings were fluttering, and I'd seen many of them flying above the water. I then spotted that it was beginning to sink. I quickly grabbed a net and fished it out. What is it?" And let's have a look at the photo. Oh my word, it's a very detailed photograph of some sort of insect. A damsel?
No, but fairly close. It's really such a sad creature, if I like to put it like that. It's a mayfly. Ephemera dancia is the scientific name, and it's very distinctive because it does look like a butterfly. The wings are folded up above its body, translucent, and almost looks like lead pane glass when you look through a window like that. And why I said it's sad is it lives in the water for about 700 days, 2 years, as a nymph. Then, one particular morning, it will climb up a grass stem on the edge of a pond or water and pupate, and out comes this little insect, which is about 1.5 inches long, similar width on the wingspan. And it hatches, becomes an adult, it mates usually in the afternoon, lays its eggs in the evening on the water, and then wait for it, it dies. Both the male and the female, they live a day.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yes.
Their job is done.
Yes.
And they turn their toes up.
Yeah, so it deposits its eggs on the water, and so the observation there was it's flapping its wings on the top of the water. It was just dipping perhaps its abdomen and laying the eggs on the surface of the water.
So that's a mayfly.
That's a mayfly, really popular amongst anglers. I used to use mayfly lures when I was fishing on the River Tass for trout, and you'd have a lure that looked rather like a mayfly. It was tied in a particular way and cast out on the water and pull it back across the top as though it was a mayfly just laying her eggs on the water, and hope you'd get a trout. But there we are. So, as I said, it's very sad. It sounds rather like a sort of operetta with a very sad ending, that the male and the heroine both die in it. But nevertheless, that's what she was doing. So she wasn't drowning. She was either laying her eggs or she had laid her eggs and then gives up the ghost. Oh dear. Sorry about that.
Let's move on to Colin Surrey. Dear Chris and Matthew, we've been enjoying your podcast since they began, and radio before that. But whilst visiting an open garden, my wife and I noticed something unusual happening in a stone trough of water. It was a hot, sunny day. The trough was alive with honeybees. The bees in the trough, around the damp edge right by the water, do you think they were getting a drink?
Yes, well, we've just knelt down by the lake here, and on the edge of the margin where it's muddy and wet, we saw honeybee actually drinking. And this year, and I've accidentally kind of answered the question much earlier in this podcast, because in dry weather, plants almost stop producing nectar. And we had a hot spell last year. We were standing only about 100 metres away from 12 beehives, and I asked the apiarist, the beekeeper, how the honey flow was going, and he said it's more or less non-existent. This was a year ago, because the plants are under so much stress. They're not producing the nectar, but they're still producing the pollen, and pollen is obviously very dry. They feed the pollen to the brood, then seal the caps over, but they do need to add some moisture, so bees will take water in for themselves into their honey stomach, and also to help mix with the pollen to feed to the brood. So they do collect water, and And what you were witnessing was quite amazing, really. And there's a little photograph. They say a picture says 1,000
But
words.
they'll be all right, will they?
Yes, they're fine. They're just drinking. They don't go in the water, otherwise they're doomed. But it's because it's a risky thing to do, to be on the water's edge.
It's precarious anyway, isn't it?
It certainly does. They're right against the ellipse of the water, and they just put their little proboscis in and drink a minuscule amount. You imagine when they're collecting nectar from all the different plants they visit, each tiny droplet of nectar does contain water. In dry years, the water content of the nectar is more or less non-existent, because in normal evenings, bees don't stop work in the daytime, just in the sunshine. At night time, if you have a beehive or you're near a bee nest and you listen, you can actually hear humming in the hive. And what they're doing is fanning the moisture out of the top of the nectar that they've stored during that particular day until it gets to a particular specific gravity. The bees know that. Once it gets to the right stage, they then cap it over with wax, which is produced from the heads of young worker bees, and then that keeps the honey for decades and decades. So amazing creatures, and a great hobby to have as well, to become a beekeeper.
Lovely spot, Colin, and thanks for the question. Richard Turkington says, with the current dry spell, I was wondering how soil moisture levels vary with depth. Still lots of greenery on trees, so presumably they're getting their moisture from much deeper down from earlier rain.
Yes. Now, two important things to remember. There are various soil types. Some are moisture retentive, things like peat, sphagnum moss, and on the bogs, for instance. Then the main two soil types in the UK are sands and clays, and also a mixture of the two, so you can have loamy soil with lots of organic matter in. Now, sand particles, as you know, if you rub them between your fingers, it feels very abrasive. They're large and they can't hold the water. So it was also used in terms of when farmers ploughed fields with horses, it would be called light soil, because it was light work for the horses to pull the plough. And the converse of that is heavy soil, because it is heavy work for the horses to plough, and that would be clay. Now, if you damp clay and rub it between your thumb and your index finger, it's like a paste. And so the particle size in clay is tiny, and it's got much better sort of capillarity, it's called, and its plant roots can sense where the water is, and they'll go down to seek the water. And is called hydrotropism, which is one of many tropisms I had to learn about at school. Geotropism is going towards gravity. A negative geotropism is what a shoot has, and it grows away from gravity. And chemotropism or thigmotropism, and there's another interesting one, when a plant root will grow round a stone because it's touched the stone, knows it can't go through it, so it diverts round a stone. Thigma is Latin for touch, so it's avoiding it. So hydrotropism is what we're talking about, and so it's really, really interesting.
I must have had a day off school when that was all being talked about.
No, I loved that. I absolutely loved it.
Is it biology?
I learnt my 8 tropisms off by heart.
We've got a sound now to identify, or just to enjoy. John and Philippa. I know how much Rat loves a challenge, so I thought he might enjoy this recording from my mobile. Taken at RSPB Minsmere, I stopped to record a garden warbler singing from about 4 metres away. I thought I'd made a mistake though when it turned into a blackcap. Was it a case of mimicry? No, because the garden warbler started again. Now they were both singing at the same time, one superimposed on the other. The blackcap was also about 4 metres away and about 3 metres, if that, from the garden warbler.
Yes, that can be really, really confusing. It's bad enough trying to identify an individual species, particularly the warbler like a blackcap, and it can sing at this time of the year, sings its heart out when it's in its territory. And garden warblers, well, it's a bit of a misnomer as really for the garden warbler. You'll more often find them in areas of scrub and in woodland too, as you will the blackcap. And the two singing together, because they are kind of members of the same family, they will sing in order to set up their territories, and it can be quite loud, and it's very disconcerting, particularly if you're recording in mono. And I switched many years ago into stereo recording, and that kind of changed my life. So you'll have one headphone on one side of your head, one on the other, and you'll have two different sounds coming in, and it's just inspiring, to say the least, when you listen to birdsong, particularly if you have the ability to slow it down as well, and you're in another world then. But well done.
I've been down where you were recently, Aldborough, watching the swifts and seeing a young adder crossing the path.
Yes.
20 centimetres long, John and Philip have measured.
That's about 8 inches long. Very beautiful reptiles, really stunning. So well done, and stunning place there to see the swifts there on the Suffolk coast.
Chris Hanley announces himself as Peak District correspondent. Just an observation, cow parsley seems thinner this year. The ribwort plantain seed heads higher, and what looks like a bumper showing of meadowsweet later in June. I'm sure, like other wildflowers and blossom, there are differing years of abundance. This is the first time I've noticed the cow parsley being less.
Yes, I've noticed that too, but firstly with the meadowsweet, it generally goes beside streams, damp sort of underfoot, and it's a beautiful plant. Meadowsweet actually comes from mead sweetener, where the monks from years ago used to sweeten their mead with it. That's where the name comes from. It was also used as a medieval air freshener on kitchens in Elizabethan times many centuries ago, because it's got a wonderful perfume to it. But the damp weather has suited it, and the warm conditions that we have in East Anglia is absolutely superb. So the cow parsley, I've noticed that it's usually on banks along roadside, and it's suffering from the early drought we had, so the plants have adjusted themselves quite sensibly to about half their normal height here in Norfolk, and also much less foliage, and that's kind of sensible thing. They can still flower, they can still produce seed, but much less abundant than normal.
Thank you for all the questions. chris@highashfarm.com is the email address. And thanks once again for your donations. Just to say, the podcast runs on voluntary donations, and we're very grateful for all of them. And the High Ash Farm website will give you details of how to keep the podcast going.
And it's just great to share what we're seeing with everybody. There are beautiful parts of our world still in existence, and I just love sharing all the other creatures, animals, insects that share the farm with me.
And you're getting a suntan to boot.
Oh, look at this. Yes.
Bronzed Adonis.
Yes, exactly.